And here we are. Welcome back to the Redshirt Sophomore, where we never sit out. We, your hosts, MD and CD. But guess what? Back-to-back episodes, y'all are getting a special guest. Today, we are rocking with the boys, with Jason, for Rock Boys Football. We're so happy to have him on. This guy, I mean, if you follow his channel, which, by the way, it'll be down in the description, make sure you guys go give him a subscription, check out his video. I mean, he is on top of recruiting. He's on top of everything. I mean, he's posting a ton a day. He does a way better job at this than we do, which is exactly why we are happy to have him on today. Jason, how you doing, man?
What up? I appreciate you guys having me on. Doing well. It's been a wild last couple of months on the recruiting trail. So excited to sit down, talk a little recruiting with you guys, and appreciate you guys having me on. Big fan of what y'all been doing.
Oh, well, I mean, look, we're fans. I mean, hey, your channel blew up. We just want to say that we were there early on ish.
Love it.
Ish. So, but thank you. CD, how are you doing, man?
Nothing much. Super excited today. National Signing Day, especially the February one, has always been, to me, I consider it a national holiday. I get up early before school, back in middle school or whatever it was, turn on ESPNU, and you got Tom Luganville and the boys back when ESPN cared about recruiting, and I love it. And obviously, super excited to hear from Jason and Rock Boys. We love your channel. Obviously, if you guys are college football diehards, you're going to love that content. And even if you are maybe just a casual or someone that just likes college football, but wants to really get into it, Rock Boys channel, Rock Boys Football is where to go.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. If you look up Rock Boys Nebraska, Rock Boys Oregon, whatever your team is, he's going to have a bajillion videos on that. So he's covering everything. But yeah, so what is the agenda today? We're going to be talking about a few players. We want to highlight four. You know, it's not early signing day, right? And you know what? I wish we would have had an opportunity to cover early signing day, but we were just absolutely swamped, CD and I. So we get our chance on National Signing Day here in February. We're going to cover four guys. Then we're going to talk, you know, who are some teams that are hot, you know, maybe who are some teams that are not. And Jason's going to be here with us throughout all of that. Make sure you guys, the rule here is, look, if you like the video, like if you like the content, like the video. Sorry, fumbled that one. If you like the content, like the video, consider subscribing. Listen to us if you listen to us on Spotify, consider following us. Give a 5-star review if you really, really like the content. And if you're not going to do it for us, do it for Jason, right? So his channel will be down in the description. So are you guys ready to get going here?
Ready to rock and roll.
Oh, ready to rock with the boys. Here we go. Let's start here. Let's start with Terry Bussey. 5-star athlete, played quarterback, safety, wide receiver, whatever you wanted him to play in high school. It's coming down to kind of three teams right now. I know the graphic has LSU, A&M. I believe Georgia's also in the mix here as well. And, you know, I'm the A&M guy, and I should know these things better. But I'm going to start with you, Jason. One, where do you think Terry Bussey lands in 2 days? Two, what would that mean to that team?
Well, starting with Terry Bussey, the player, I mean, this is a guy that can play so many different positions, but at the end of the day, get him on campus. You'll figure out the rest of that when it shakes out. It's a guy that on the track time is posting a 10.6 in the 100 meters. So absolute burners, crazy movement skills. You talked about it. I mean, he plays quarterback, he plays defensive back, he plays wide receiver. I think he's going to be an elite wide receiver at the college football level. Now, talking about where he's going to end up, I know I ain't ever going to count out Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. Like, these guys go hard on the recruiting trail. There's both of these teams, LSU and Texas A&M, a lot of momentum. Obviously committed to Texas A&M right now. I know LSU is making a push. I'm not going to pretend like I'm an insider on the recruiting trail, but if I were to place a crystal ball, if you will, it's probably going to be Texas A&M, right? He was on campus. I think Mike Elko is really selling a lot of these guys on the future of this program. I was a massive fan of the Mike Elko hire. So I'm leaning Texas A&M, staying in the state of Texas. But it does really sound like this one is kind of neck and neck with the Aggies and LSU kind of going down the stretch here.
CD, I want to hear the same from you. Well, I as an A&M fan, I would like to hear you say that he is going to Texas A&M, but you know, where do you think he's going, and what kind of impact do you think that he will have on a team when he gets there?
Yeah, he's a tremendous talent. Obviously, you mentioned the track times, the football acumens. He was a 3-sport guy, football, track, and basketball. Yeah, he's a dynamic player in all three phases. special teams early on for sure, but also offensively, for A&M, I think they're more so seeing him as a wide receiver, and I think LSU and Georgia, from what I've heard, think of him more as a safety. Regardless, though, like you said, get him on campus, figure out everything else after that. Like that's a good problem to have. Yeah, I think this is a huge, recruitment battle for Mike Elko. I think more than Brian Kelly and Kirby Smart. Those guys are two veteran, established guys in their programs. Both of their classes are pretty darn good at the high school level as it is. And he's an in-state guy for A&M. We'll talk about later how important the Ryan Williams signing for Kalen DeBoer was. And I think this is a similar situation where Mike Elko comes into a job and, like some people, I guess, didn't think he was qualified for. He's in over his heels. You can't win at A&M, all that good stuff. But if he can come in right away and seal this down and honor his commitment and sign on the dotted line for A&M, that would be massive for them, especially in a class where the wide receivers, you're losing Evan Stewart, but also some guys are maybe upperclassmen, but also he can get some early playing time there as well.
I think one other thing, one thing, obviously, special teams may like freak show with the football in his hands, but I think you mentioned Mike Elko and kind of getting that in-state recruiting going. I think the biggest question people had with the Mike Elko hire in College Station was, is he going to be able to recruit in the SEC? Is he going to be able to bang with guys like Texas and LSU on the recruiting trail? Like, what better message to send than landing the most coveted unsigned player right now from the state of Texas and Terry Bussey? Look, Mike Elko, proven player developer. The question is, can he get talent on campus? I think if he lands Terry Bussey, I think a lot of those questions kind of get subsided a little bit.
All right, let me bring up 2 points to y'all. So one, both A&M and LSU, their primary recruiters were defensive back coach. Defensive back coaches for Texas A&M and LSU were the primary recruiters for Terry Bussey. Does that foreshadow maybe the positional value in which he's going to play? I know you guys think he's going to be a receiver. I think A&M does need receivers, but also it's very telling in the transfer portal. They went and got 6-7 guys in the defensive back room. So they're not set there at all in their minds, at least. That's why they're getting after all these guys. The other tidbit I want to bring up is Nick Scorden is Terry Bussey's cousin.
Did not know
How important does that play a role in this as well?
One, no doubt, that's massive. I had no clue. That one must have slipped through my notes, but that's obviously massive. Nick Scorden, as a Big Ten fan, you guys got a real one there. Going back to the position Terry Bussey plays, this is a guy that when I turn on the film, you want the football in this kid's hands. So I personally would love to see him as a wide receiver because I think that's where he's excelling the most. That being said, with the athletic traits that he has, kind of like what CD said, this is going to be a ball player, regardless of what position he's playing. But when I go back and look at the impact that he has on a football game, this is a guy that I want the football in his hands with. So I'm leaning wide receiver. But again, if he does play defensive back, you're getting a damn good defensive back as well.
To add to that point, I do think you mentioned that the 2 guys that are recruiting him are defensive backs coach. Those are also 2 of the holdovers from the Jimbo Fisher era that did continue to recruit with him and developed a great relationship. On the offensive side of the ball, you have Holman Wiggins, a hire that we talked about, wide receiver coach coming over from Alabama, who was his primary recruiter at Alabama, who was also heavily interested in Terry Bussey. So you got 3 guys there with major connections. Again, more so reason why this is a massive recruitment for Mike Elko and his staff to close on.
Well, see, I think actually Holman Wiggins was secondary recruiter. Actually, Coleman Hutzler was the primary recruiter in that Saban staff, who he's now at Mississippi State or whatnot. But so all the primary recruiters are DBs coaches, and then you'd have Holman Wiggins in there. I don't know. I feel really weird about this. What he's actually going to play in college. Again, you've said it, Jason. He can play anything. If you turn on his high school tape, it is absurd. It is freakish. It is freakish. At quarterback. He plays quarterback. Yeah. And he's blowing out dudes. Now, what was it? 4A at Timpson. So it's not 6A, but gosh, he was absurd. So I'm looking forward to this.
I do want to ask a question for you, Jason, or Matthew, whoever wants to answer this. So I guess not a big deal, but a note that I saw that was kind of interesting that piqued my interest was because of the coaching change from Jimbo Fisher to Mike Elko, Texas A&M does get a second official visit, which he was just able to use in this January. How much big of a difference is that versus an unofficial visit, or what's the difference there? Does that play a factor in and all that good stuff? Because he was at LSU for an unofficial, but it was also an A&M for official visit. What's the difference in that for our viewers?
So, from my understanding, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert on this, but an official visit, you get a lot more kind of funded from the school. And more importantly, like you can do a lot more things. I know for unofficial visits now, and this is, again, I wouldn't quote me word for word on this, but my understanding is unofficial visits, no photo shoots, a lot less kind of restrictions on some of the things you can do on campus. And then the official visits, it's kind of in all systems go in terms of the resources that you can employ. And I didn't know that they got a second official visit with Terry Bussey. No doubt in my mind, that certainly helps their case in this recruitment coming down the stretch.
That's great. I'm sure Matthew loves to hear that. Everything
I
sounds so great for A&M, but also like you can never count out, like you said, Kirby Smart or LSU DBU.
No, absolutely not. I do want to move on though. Let's talk about as much as much as I love talking Texas A&M. Let's talk about Galen Bear. 4-star, 5-star. I mean, it's different wherever you look, right? He committed to Oregon. He's not signed yet, but he's committed to Oregon, right? I mean, he was originally committed to Boise State, which is a big deal for the Broncos over there. Big loss of the commitment once they fired forget his name now. Spencer Danielson's there.
Andy Alvos.
Andy Alves. Beautiful. Thank you, Jason, for the save there. Jason, I know I think you're excited about Galen Bear, and I think you're excited about Oregon's weapons. Can you explain to me what Galen Bear does for this Oregon Ducks team?
Yeah, speed is this is a guy that Olympic level track times. You talked about Terry Bussey being one of the fastest players in the class, running a 10.66. Galen Bear 10.15. And this is a guy that could be going to the Olympics had he wanted to train on the track and field. Game breaking speed, and you turn on the film, you certainly see it. And I think the thing that steps out or kind of stands out for me with Galen Bears, it's not just that vertical speed. And this is something kind of we talk about a lot is I think it's easy to get wrapped up in track times. I've already given you guys 2 track times. Yes, being vertically fast in a straight line is massive, but can you get in and out of your breaks? Can you create separation? I think Galen Bear can do all of that as well. So you're getting a guy who is the fastest player on the football field the minute he steps on, but a guy that after the catch, making people miss, creating separation. I mean, certainly massive for the Ducks here. And as a Michigan fan, it was kind of coming down to Oregon and Michigan. He goes to Oregon, and you can't really blame him after seeing what Bo Nix just did in 2023 with guys like Tez Johnson and Troy Franklin. I mean, Galen Bear, difference maker the minute he steps on campus. Now, I think the caveat is 2-year mission trip after high school, so he's not going to be on campus for the Oregon Ducks until 2026. Yeah, whenever he gets on campus for the Oregon Ducks, you are getting a kind of different dude in terms of the speed department.
Yeah, so like, let me ask you, does the mission trip like turn off folks in the recruiting department?
Yes, it did.
Like,
I was surprised. So we hopped on and covered it right when it happened. I kind of dropped what I was doing. This one was a big one. And there were some fans that weren't happy about it. The way I look at it is you look at Oregon's wide receiver room for the next 2 years, like Galen Bear, as special as he is. I mean, I'm not sure how much he's playing year one, right? Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, they have a very loaded veteran wide receiver room in 2024. So I don't know if he'd be playing that much then. I mean, 2025, you'd love to have him, but when you get him in 2026, you're going to have guys like Ryan Pelham and Jeremiah McClellan, also 2 wide receivers that they signed in 2024. I think it's not necessarily a blessing in disguise, but you're going to get Galen Bear in 2026 when he probably has a little bit more of an opportunity to step in day one and kind of make an impact for Oregon, where if you were to be on this Oregon roster in 2024, I mean, how much is he going to play over guys like Evan Stewart and guys like Tez Johnson and Trayshawn Holden during that 2024 year?
Yeah, not only that, you also have to factor in the adjustment to competitive play, right? He came
Agreed.
from a school in Idaho. Obviously, the football there is not as elite as it is in some parts of the country for sure. And you saw that a little bit at the All-American Bowl, which he ended up actually thriving and playing really well. And obviously got a bump from 24/7 because of, you saw not only the speed, but also, like you mentioned, getting in out of cuts, creating separation, and not just being a track player, but also a football player with track speed. I think that it would be nice for him to get on campus, but like you said, they got guys there, veterans in that room, that are already ready to play right now. I don't think it hurts them too much to not get him for the first couple years. And you also get him like he'll still have all 4 years of eligibility.
Yeah.
It's not like he'll lose them. And so he'll just be a 20-year-old freshman, right? You think back to Calvin Ridley, and not necessarily the same situation, but an older freshman, you can come in and you're more physically ready to play at the next level.
Agreed.
So why do you think he went to Oregon over Michigan? Was the final two, Jason? And you're a Michigan fan, so I want to hear this.
I mean, as a Michigan fan, it's if you're a 5-star wide receiver and you're trying to figure out where you want to go play your football. I mean, there's a reason why Ohio State, the Oregon Ducks, they're attracting the 5-star talent. You look at the offense and how the offense is run; it's run through the passing attack. And for Michigan, make no mistake about it, like we push the ball down the field, but I mean, it's much more of a run-heavy system where you're kind of playing 12 personnel, not a ton of playing time and opportunities for wide receivers. And we kind of say it with this Oregon team. Why did Evan Stewart go to Oregon out of the transfer portal? Why did Gatlin Bair decide to go to Oregon out of the high school trail? This is an offense that you want to go play for if you're a playmaking wide receiver. And I think that's kind of one of the things I'm a little bit more critical as a Michigan fan. And we don't have that explosive offense. And so it gets really hard to sell these 5-star wide receivers to come up to Ann Arbor when we're not really kind of pushing the ball down the field as much as programs like the Oregon Ducks are.
Yeah, I also want to mention, and I agree with that 1,000%, but I do think, not to go back to the mission trip, but I think that does play a little bit of a role into it in terms of program stability, 2 to 3 years down the line.
Yep.
I love the Strong Moore hire. I do really like it. I think Michigan is obviously very well suited culturally and everything else in the new era of college football to succeed in it. But I do think you look at what Oregon and Dan Lanning has right now, and I think it's a lot more known than unknown versus Michigan, where you could come back from mission trip and it's like, what the hell happened, at Michigan. And obviously we hope that doesn't happen for our buddy Jason here. But yeah, I think that's part of it,
100% agree. I think Dan Lanning pretty much saying I'm staying in Eugene, not going to Alabama, didn't even give it a look. I think if you're Gatlin Bair saying, yeah, I'm not enrolling until 2026. Yeah, Oregon's pretty steady ship. I think what this program is going to look like in 2026 for Gatlin Bair. And I think that played a heavy role as well. I think that's a good point.
I do want to talk about real quick in terms of like class fit and how this looks for Oregon for both of you guys here. We kind of saw them put an emphasis on the wide receiver position in December and January with, the Evan Stewart in the portal. They flipped Jeremiah McClellan, like you mentioned, from Ohio State, and obviously closing with Gatlin Bair here. Do you think that's part of what they're doing with moving to the Big Ten, or in terms of like seeing Washington just beat them twice at with these elite wide receivers, and that makes a difference here? Or is this just like, oh, Dan Lanning's just stockpiling talent,
Me personally, I think there's probably an argument of both. I think we talked about this a lot with Oregon. Like, I think Dan Lanning comes from that Kirby Smart mantra of like, enough's never enough. Like, you want as much competition and depth in these position groups as you can. And so we're going to go get Evan Stewart if we can get Evan Stewart. We're going to get Gatlin Bair if we can get Gatlin Bair. And I think that you talk about them turning the heat up for these wide receivers. They also flipped Ryan Pellin from USC on signing day in December. So it's I wonder if it did play a role where you just see the Washington Huskies trot out 3 NFL wide receivers with an NFL quarterback and go to work, get to the national championship game, and say Dan Lanning thinks we got to kind of emulate that kind of structure. I wouldn't be surprised if that was in the back of his head as well.
Well, let's move on. Let's talk about Ryan Williams. Pretty special player, if you ask me. 5-star. He's committed to Alabama. He hasn't signed yet, right? But he's going to Alabama, right? I mean, there's not a real doubt here at all.
No, I think he was committed to Alabama, decommitted when Nick Saban left. I think he's going to wind up in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, and by the way, if you're a wide receiver and Kalen DeBoer moves into your situation, the guy who has, I don't know, a pretty decent track record with Ryan Grubb developing receivers, you would think that, I understand the decommit, right, and step back and look at your recruiting like as a whole. But it feels like sticking with Kalen DeBoer with this level of talent feels like the right move for him, likely. So, am I correct in saying that? Probably
100% agree. I think Auburn. We had a lot of Auburn listeners who were really frustrated because it was kind of an Auburn, Alabama. I know he took a visit to Texas A&M as well, but I think Alabama, Auburn were kind of battling it out. And I think when he decommitted from Alabama, I think a lot of Auburn fans had a lot of buzz around Ryan Williams potentially coming to Auburn. But I think with the Kalen DeBoer signing, it was, I mean, what better head coach to play for if you're a wide receiver than a guy that is going to put out 3 NFL draft picks from that wide receiver position at Washington. This one, in my mind, made a ton of sense for Ryan Williams.
Yeah,
So
that
yeah,
has to play.
I know you're the biggest, well, not the biggest, but you were the biggest Ryan Williams fan that I know. So I need you to make the case for this guy just being an absolute stud.
Yeah, well, first of all, he did something that never really happened in the state of Alabama. He won Mr. Alabama for 2 consecutive seasons in a row as a sophomore and a junior. Right, people kind of gets brushed under the rug of how impressive he is and how highly rated he was in this closing class when they finally updated the rankings. But he is a 2025 original. He got reclassified to 2024, so he's a junior, and he'll still come in and I think compete for playing time right away, even though he should be, getting ready for his senior season in high school. I love it. You turn on the film, he is incredible. I love that his highlights, the first few plays are him just being physical, blocking or around at the catch, all that good stuff. Trying to I'm sure he's trying to disprove, the mention that he's a little bit on the shorter side and maybe smaller side. But you look at guys who've had success like that in the SEC, Devonta Smith comes to mind. And obviously it's lofty expectations, a Heisman Trophy winner, first round pick. But I think that's real when it comes to Ryan Williams. To me, he seems more of like a Zachariah Branch. To me, he's a guy that was in the 2023 class in USC. He's a guy, I know Matthew and I'm sure Jason, we were super high on him since week 0 and obviously the preseason as well. Yeah, he is awesome. Run after the catch, setting up routes, all super elite for his age. And obviously he'll go to a system that will benefit him, but also develop him fantastic as well.
And it's funny you mentioned the Devonta Smith comp because that's kind of I went as far as saying kind of a juiced up Devonta Smith comp because you're right, wiry guys, definitely undersized, but movement skills are absolutely insane. And I get it, Heisman Trophy winner. I'm calling Ryan Williams a juiced up Devonta Smith. He's got to put it on the field at the college level, but he's faster than Devonta Smith. I mean, this dude has absolute burners. But I think you said it best. So what separates Ryan Williams, and going back to the same conversation we had about Gatlin Bear, what makes these guys truly special is they're football players. I'm going to use that. They're football players with track speed. I like that because he's a guy that, man, you talk about creating separation. You talk about working after the catch, just a different level of juice in the movement skills. I think this is a guy that even though he reclassified from that 2025 class, I did not know he was Mr. Alabama twice in a row. So he probably would have been a 3-timer had he stayed in the 2025 class. This dude is hard to see not playing early for Alabama because he's a special one.
Yeah, and that wide receiver room, I mean, what's left? There's talent there, obviously, but what's left in terms of returning production? Right? No Jermaine Burton, no Isaiah Bond, no Amari Nyblack catching passes for you. So it's going to be looking very, very different. There's plenty of opportunity for a receiver to step up immediately. And what shocked me was that, you guys both mentioned he's an underclassman. He's a little bit smaller. He was the highlights of him at, was it the Under Armour All-American or was it whatever, some showcase, whatever he was at. And he was bodying dudes, and he was going up. He was high pointing the football. I was mad impressed with him, and then he caught a touchdown in that game as well. I was mad impressed. How old is he? Is he even 17 years old?
Not sure the age, but yeah.
Did he? He was 16. He was 16 at the Under Armour All-American Games. I know that. I don't know if he just turned over, but that's what's
absurd. Geez, that is absurd. That's absurd. So he might have just turned 17. Who cares? That's a 16-year-old doing that to man, that's crazy. 16, that's a kid. That is a kid. That is unbelievable.
I'm sure that stat will be used, multiple times as he's tearing up the SEC. It was he's only 17, blah, blah, blah. And it's you'll get nauseous of it, but it's also it's hard to overstate that where it's pretty impressive. I do want to ask a question for both of you guys here. We talked about it a little bit with Mike Elko and how important that the Terry Bussey win potentially could be for him and his staff. Ryan Williams has already win for Kalen DeBoer. It sounds like everything but the signing on the dotted line this Wednesday. How important is that for his staff and his fan base, his boosters, the team confidence, and everything that happens? Because this was a massive recruitment that was a little bit national, but very, very intense in the state of Alabama.
in my mind, huge. That's the biggest question. Again, we talked about the question about Mike Elko recruiting at Texas A&M. I think a lot of the same questions were with Kalen DeBoer, who, I mean, I was kind of critical of Kalen DeBoer winning as much as he did at Washington and never really getting the momentum on the recruiting trail that you would like to see. And I've said it a couple times. I'll say it again, like Hugh Freeze, Kirby Smart. Like, I think they're licking their chops a little bit seeing Kalen DeBoer take over at Alabama. But for Kalen DeBoer to come in and lock down one of the most talented wide receivers in this class, I think sends a message, excuse me, that he's here to kind of compete with the big dogs of the SEC. Now, I think the bigger question for me is, how is he going to be able to recruit on the defensive side of the football? Because, again, Kirby Smart, Hugh Freeze at Auburn, like, I really do think they probably smell a little blood in the water in the states of Georgia and Alabama on the recruiting trail. We'll see how it plays out, but this one, massive win for Kalen DeBoer early on here.
I think especially it was important that it was in the state of Alabama, because what footprint does Kalen DeBoer have here? Sioux Falls, right? I mean, Washington, Southern Illinois, Eastern Michigan, Fresno State, Indiana. I mean, zero footprint in the Southeast, and then just walk in like that. And like, let's be real, he had to win this recruitment, right? I mean, he did, right? Ryan Williams was committed to Nick Saban. Right. I mean, Ryan Williams was committed to Nick Saban. That's what he's committed to. He had to re-win this one. So, I mean, is it easier that it was in state? Yeah, but also, like, I mean, Hugh Freeze was knocking at the door. Steve Sarkisian was knocking at the door. Holman Williams goes over to A&M. He's knocking at the door. I mean, that's crazy to me. This was really impressive for me by Kalen DeBoer. So I agree with everything you said, Jason.
Those are all the coaches that worked 18 plus months to build a relationship with Ryan Williams, and they come in 30 days and expedite that process. Like, that is super impressive. Obviously, you mentioned defensively, different story, but offensively, this was kind of like the perfect storm, I guess, for you, for that staff there, because of all the success that just happened with their receivers, Roma Dunse, McMillan, and Polk. But yeah, obviously this was massive. I'm excited to watch him. As a fan of college football, I'm excited for him. I'm glad he reclassified because we get to see him a year earlier.
I have a question for you guys. This is kind of off the recruiting topic. Who do you think starts at quarterback for Alabama in 2024? Putting you guys on the spot. Apologies.
I know exactly what Christopher's gonna say, but I know what he wants to say.
I mean, I have to say Milroe, right? If you tell me, like, if I only have to pick the quarterbacks on this roster right now, because there were some rumors that they went after Fafita. Those were kind of a little bit, I don't know if those were true or not, but there was some money thrown around allegedly for Fafita. But yeah, I think I have to go Milroe. I really like Dylan Longerum. I really, really like him.
Yeah, I had a feeling you were gonna say that.
He's super sneaky. He generated a lot of buzz last spring, and even the fall camp when that quarterback competition was still up for grabs. I don't know. I don't think Austin Mack's quite ready yet. I don't think he's coming in to start day one, but I don't know. I think there's some viable options. We'll see. Milroe.
That's kind of my question, though, because I just look at what Kalen DeBoer wants to do, and can Jalen Milroe do that? I think that'll be a massive question. My pick's actually Austin Mack. I think Kalen DeBoer brought him over for a reason. So that's who I'm going with. But that's, I think, a bigger story that I think a lot of people are talking about for Alabama is who's going to be playing quarterback for them in 2024.
No, absolutely. That's a huge one. And like Austin Mack, he's large, right? He's got the size, right? I mean, like, he's not as thick as Jalen Milroe, but he's got the size. He's got the arm talent. I mean, I like where you're going with that, Jason. I like where you're going with that, but I haven't seen Austin Mack play enough to kind of make that thing. And I haven't seen Dylan Lonergan play enough either. But it's like, I'm with you, Christopher. I think it's Jalen Milroe that like starts day one, right? But that does not mean that he's finishing the season at all. That's not what that means. But I am kind of secretly rooting for Dylan Lonergan. I really like that guy. That guy's got an absolute seed of an arm. Love that guy. He's planting that thing everywhere.
He got the baseball throw.
He does. Baseball. I love a good baseball throw from a quarterback. Let's get into Kevin Humes. Is that how you pronounce it, Christopher?
Yep.
Kevin Humes, 4-star corner. He commits to Maryland. Jason, I want you to start us off on this, and then CD, we'll come to you after because you're the Big Ten guy. Well, actually, you're both Big Ten guys, but CD's my Big Ten guy. So sorry.
Is he Is he's from St. Francis Academy, right? I want to make sure I got that
Yes.
high school right. Yeah. One, love kids from St. Francis Academy, especially as a defensive back. I mean, this is a gritty program that puts out a lot of talent into the college football world. And Coach Locke, I mean, he does a sneaky good job on the recruiting trail. And I think kind of getting outside the recruiting scope, Big Ten conferences or Big Ten divisions going away is going to help Coach Locke a lot because I mean, bumping their head against Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. They've always been a team that's competing with us as a Michigan fan. Like, you never want to play Maryland. They always give us a tough game. I think this is a Maryland team that is going to wake a lot of people up because I think Coach Loxley's quietly getting it done on the recruiting trail, just not quite to the extent that Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State are. And so now that the divisions are going away, I think you see this Maryland team make a little bit more noise than I think we've had in the past.
For sure. They've had success in the NFL as well, in the NFL draft. Most recently,
Yes.
Deontay Banks, right at this position of Kevin Humes. This is a big time win. He's a guy that another guy that reclassified from 2025 to 2024. Syracuse got in on him with Fran Brown. We know I like that. If Fran Brown wants you as a DB, I like you as well automatically. Penn State was obviously been recruiting him for a while. And they've obviously had success. Kalen King and Joey Porter Jr. as of late. USC with DeAnton Lynn got in late as well. And then Florida really went after him too when he reclassified. But yet for Maryland to win him and the in-state guy, you mentioned St. Francis Academy. He's joining his teammate, right? Dejon Williams, another 4-star running back, coming to in-state, the Terrapins there. Yeah, this is awesome. He's a guy, 4.4 40-yard dash, 37-inch vertical jump. Yeah, I like his tape a lot. He's pretty explosive in the return game, which I like as a DB to be shifty and acceleration. We obviously know that the caliber of players he's playing is pretty impressive with their schedule that they do play. So he's physical. He makes tackles in the run game. But he is smaller, right? And a little bit younger, and it might take some time developing in 2024, where there is a little bit of a need there for Maryland at cornerback. But regardless, though, this was a big time win. Like you mentioned, Mike Loxley is looking to kind of burst through that ceiling they keep bumping their head on, which you said there. And obviously, this is step one in that.
Yeah, I do want to bring up this as well. Like Maryland, it was in state. Sure, it was in state. Awesome. But there were some really, really great coaches with great track records of coaching DBs and sending him to the NFL that were after him. Right? Syracuse is one, right? I mean, Fran Brown over there. You had Penn State, large history of Florida, Deanne Lynn. And he goes to Maryland. But you know what? Maryland has a pretty good track record too. I mean, you mentioned it. Deontay Banks, you got Jacory Bennett, you got Darnell Savage, you got Antoine Brooks, just in the Mike Loxley era. So it's not like Maryland can't develop some DBs either.
It's
So
a sneaky program. Like it's just a program again that doesn't get a ton of talk because they do lose to Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan. But I think this is a team that once you kind of get out of those divisions, this is a team that I'm really excited for. Again, Coach Locke doing a really good job.
I want you guys to guess how many Maryland players were drafted to the NFL last year.
Oof.
You had Raheem Jarrett was one. Did Dante Demas get drafted?
No,
I
Raheem
think
Jarrett
he's a
did not get
UDFA.
drafted.
Wait, Raheem Jarrett didn't?
He did not get drafted.
So I was counting both of them. At the DB.
So like the other few are kind of difficult. Offensive line and kicker, right? So it'd be tough to guess those names, right? But five. They had five drafted this last year. Yeah. That's crazy. That's crazy. That's some good talent. And we'll see how they keep that up post Talia Tagovailoa era there at Maryland. But I don't know. I am personally on the train that Billy Edwards stinks. But
why are you on that train? I'm on the train.
I'm on the Billy Edwards stinks train, right? And and I was a little bit pissed off too because like for my bowl pool, like the confidence points, I loaded it on Auburn, right? Because I'm like Billy Edwards stinks. And also, by the way, he confirmed that belief in that particular game. They just absolutely kicked Auburn's teeth in. Like it was absurd. But go on, Jason. Say
I
what you're
am
gonna say.
I'm a little biased, so I went to Wake Forest for undergrad. So Billy Edwards a Wake Forest transfer. So
Ah,
there's maybe a little less of like an actual take I have on Billy Edwards, more just he's my guy. I'm hoping that he has some success at Maryland. So we'll see how he. Oh, they had another quarterback come in and kind of dice Auburn
And
up a little
oh,
bit.
it's MJ Morris.
Well, he's
oh,
coming
oh
in the
no, no, no.
portal. Who was the player that there was a quarterback that came in like that was throwing some seeds, but I forget his name. But they got a good quarterbacker.
Well, and Loxley's done well there. You also like you mentioned, they're kind of a sneaky program, even recruiting wise. They kind of show up
Yeah.
randomly in like these top 5 graphics. You'll see like
Yes.
these guys post, and like it'll be like the 4 usual suspects, and then Maryland. It's like, okay, where'd they come from? And like even like Jordan Seaton, he showed up. They showed up late. There was a lot of steam for them.
Yep.
Obviously, Dion closed the deal there. You can't fault Maryland for that. But even like Raheem Jarrett, we talked about him a little bit ago. That was a big time win, over I believe LSU and some others in the SEC. Yeah, I like it a lot. And Kevin Hughes, back to him, he's also a guy that reclassified. So like he would be a higher rated guy. You see him, he's a low 4-star. He would be a higher rated guy in his original class if he signed a year later from now. So yeah, this is good stuff for them. And they're 32nd nationally, right? In team composite rankings. That's pretty darn good. And that'll have you competing with the rest of college football and able to, kind of keep their head above water in the new Big Ten.
Yeah, so was the player you were looking for, Cameron Edge? Is that the quarterback
Oh
you were talking
yes,
about?
yes, the
Throwing seeds?
quarterback. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He came in, played some good ball.
yeah. I just pulled up the um video of him dropping a 57-yard dime to Caden Prather.
Yeah.
Wow. So let's just say Billy Edwards will not be playing quarterback, starting quarterback for Maryland next year, right? You got MJ Morris, and then this kid Cameron Edge that Jason just introduced me to. There's no way Billy Edwards is seeing the field next year. I'm sorry. He had his moment though. He won a bowl game.
That's right.
That's
We'll
a
take that.
it's better college football career than I had. So that's freaking awesome. Good for Billy Edwards. All right, good for Billy Edwards. He did not deserve the slack that he got in this video.
No, he did not.
All right, it's time to get after it. Who's making moves? All right, I'm gonna let you two take the reins on this one. Uh, you guys are my recruiting guys. I need you. I'm on life support from you guys informing me about recruiting. Who's making moves on signing day? Who has made moves in the last couple of weeks, and maybe who flopped? I don't know. We can talk about all of it.
I'm going with the Oregon Ducks, and I don't know if they're making a move on signing day, but you talk about a team that's making moves in the right direction. And we talk about this a lot in terms of player construction and like balancing using the portal, using the high school ranks. And I think Dan Lanning's doing a phenomenal job. I mean, top 5 class in 2024. I think it's going to be a top 5 class in 2025. And then you bring in Dylan Gabriel, Dante Moore, Evan Stewart. I always say this, if I'm buying stock in a program right now, I'm buying stock in the Oregon Ducks. That is a team that I think is trending in the right direction and probably going to be my pick to win the Big Ten next year. Give me the Oregon Ducks.
I don't hate that at all. I really don't hate that. When I start doing my breakdowns and start doing the research, I'm trying to stay as unbiased as possible, but I might be leaning in your direction as well, Jason. CD?
Yeah, to me, I love the Oregon Ducks pick, not only for the future this year and after that. I think they're doing it the right way. You look at their class, their D line, front seven, and even O line class is just awesome. And I think he made an emphasis on that. He was just on the 24/7's recruiting podcast, and he talked about it. And they asked him about it. Like, yeah, he's making an emphasis not only to win in the Big Ten, but also with their goals to beyond and obviously compete with the SEC and the best of the rest in college football. This is pretty darn impressive. You mentioned he learned from guys like Kirby Smart and Nick Saban, where that's how you build a program, is from the trenches, from within and out, obviously. And also, you kind of can get caught up in rankings sometimes where like, Oregon's not a top 3 class, but what does that actually mean? And like, do you have depth in your class? Do you have positional value and breakdowns at needs at premier positions, right? And they did a really good job here. This is not a fluffy class at all. Like we've seen, teams like Texas or USC have in the past. This is a legit core group, not only in the transfer portal, but also in the high school ranks, which we know is a feeder program. It is the lifeblood of your football program. So yeah, this is super exciting. Not any like top end names, no guys that's gonna wow you like a Ryan Williams or a Cam Coleman or obviously, Dylan Raiola for Nebraska. But, these guys are all really, really good players, played really good high level football in college and good competitive football. And yeah, that I love that take.
You summed up kind of my take on the like there's not that premier like top 10 guy in their class, like the headliner, but you take a look down those rankings. I mean, it's 30 guys that are like 4-star blue chip prospects, a ton of depth. And that was the one position that I talked about as just not being quite good enough for Oregon in 2023, and that was the defensive line. Like you had guys like Brandon Dorless that like flashed, they were good players, but I don't think they had enough difference makers. And like Dan Lanning turns around and goes and gets Elijah Rushing, Aiden Breland, Jericho Johnson, kind of bolstering up those trenches. And you take a look at the skill talent they're bringing in, guys like Gatlin Bear. I mean, that team's going in the right direction. One other team that I would shout out to is Florida State. And I think that's another one of those programs that is kind of Florida State goes to battle with Alabama on the recruiting trail a lot, and you're seeing them put a lot of emphasis on the state of Georgia, going up and recruiting that state. Mike Norvell's got things rolling. And again, that's another one of those programs that I'm buying stock in. I think you might see a tad bit of a rebuilding year in 2024 because I think they lose a lot of NFL talent, and I don't know if they've recruited good enough to kind of rebound and go 13-0 again in 2024. But this is a program that, again, I like what they're doing on the recruiting trail. I like how they marry it with the transfer portal. Probably another team that's, in my mind, trending in the right direction.
Well, for sure. And they also, it could have been better too. They finished with LJ McRae and KJ Bolden. It would have been nice if you're a Seminole fan to have those guys in the class, but nonetheless, the point still stands that you made. I really like this class. Luke Kromenhoek, obviously the headliner at quarterback there, but also they just got Amaris Williams, right? Amari Williams, a guy that signed on National Signing Day and early signing day, but kept it quiet until just this past weekend. Another guy, difference maker, like we talked about at the line of scrimmage for them.
Absolutely. Let me ask you guys. I'll ask like a player specifically that has particular interest to me. I don't know if you guys are quite familiar with Ashton Bethel Roman, Arkansas commit. He'd been committed since July, signs his letter of intent in December. His wide receiver coach leaves, goes off to Wisconsin. And all of a sudden, here he is, decommitting, rescinding his national letter of intent, and it seems like he's kind of down to these two schools, Texas A&M and Baylor. So what would it mean to either of those schools if they landed one of those guys, or if they landed Ashton Bethel Roman?
Massive. When I saw that, I thought Texas A&M immediately. I think that'd be another massive addition in that 2024 class. Juice at the wide receiver position. I remember talking about him when he went to Arkansas in the summer as being a nice get. There's probably one of the top remaining guys that is kind of coming down to the finish line, right? You have guys like Terry Bussey who you're not sure. I think Ashton Bethel Roman's probably that other guy, and I think would be massive. I mean, you talk about Texas A&M on signing day Wednesday, landing Terry Bussey and Ashton Bethel Roman, massive win for Mike Elko, 100%.
Yeah, we talked about how important that wide receiver group is. That position is massive, and not that Ashton Bethel Roman would be a consolation at all, because he is a top 150 player in his own right. You mentioned it. I'm sure you talked about it in your video with him earlier in the summer. He is a legit player. Again, a nice pairing for Terry Bussey. And I believe he's a little bit bigger than Bussey, not quite as heavier, but I think a little bit taller, which is obviously you like to have some diversity in your room. But also thinking about Baylor's side is they're kind of treading water right now. Dave Aranda, since that 2021 year when they went to the Sugar Bowl, a lot of things have changed there. Obviously, they're down at 68th nationally, which is not where they need to be to, right the ship there. So this will be a nice momentum at the end for a team that's really looking to kind of, bolster the way and find their own spot in the new Big 12.
That's one of those, such a fan of Dave Aranda and what he can do from like a football mind. I think he's one of the better defensive minds that we see. Not a great recruiter. Like, let's just put it that way. And you have to, I mean, at the end of the day, I had this conversation with my dad, who's much more old school. It's about culture. But at the end of the day, like, football is a speed size game. Like, you got to get it done on the recruiting trail. And I mean, Dave Aranda, definitely strong football mind, strong culture builder, needs to get it going on the recruiting trail. What are they bringing DeQuan Finn in the portal? I think that was a sneaky good get for them. This would be huge for Dave Aranda, who, again, is a program that you really want to see pick it up on the recruiting trail, specifically kind of playing in that Big 12 conference.
Yeah, I do want to bring up Let me ask you guys this. If you were a wide receiver, would you rather play for Jake Spavital, the offensive coordinator at Baylor, who has coached, I don't know, maybe Mike Evans, David Sills, Karan White, Gary Jennings, Jeremiah Hunter most recently, or would you rather get coached by Colin Klein and what he's brought to the table recently in his offenses?
I mean, situationally, the thing with Baylor is I don't know if Dave Rand is going to be there in 12 months, quite frankly. And if
I agree.
yeah, so would I'd probably want to go play for Spavital, but I don't know what the future looks like for Baylor 12, 18 months down the road. Texas A&M, I think you have a better feel. And Coach Colin Klein, not necessarily a wide receiver factory. I mean, they've had some guys, Phillip Brooks comes to mind, but that's a more balanced offense. But if I'm Ashton Bethel Roman, I'm probably going to a program that I know what it's going to look like in 12 months. And I think that's Texas A&M over Baylor. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
I've never had the privilege of being an elite athlete to choose between schools, but if I had, that's probably where I'm leaning.
yeah, I'm gonna agree with you there. Part of the reason why he left Arkansas was his wide
Yeah.
receiver coach, right? Kenny
Yeah.
Guyton left to Wisconsin, so he opted out of his NIL or NLI. I'm sorry about that, and obviously he wants stability and change. And I think Baylor's making a push, doing the best they can. But yeah, A&M is the right fit here. And you mentioned Colin Klein. Yeah, they didn't have like Phillip Brooks, really good player in his own right. Like he only had 500, he did hit less than 600 yards, right, last year. But part of that is because of who you have offensively. You have a two-headed monster at running back. You got two quarterbacks that are probably better at running the football than they are throwing the football at times. And obviously a stud tight end and Ben Sanute that we all love. So yeah, I think I do think with stability and culture and everything else, and obviously getting a chance to play in the SEC is a big factor as well. Showing off against the best of the best, Texas A&M makes a lot of sense.
And I guess one thing to add, sorry, we're going long here, but Connor Wigman, I'm such a believer. And I know you'd be fired up to hear that, but I think Connor Wigman's got it all. If that offensive line figures it out. That was, I mean, I don't want to turn this into a Texas A&M podcast right now, but I think Connor
Hey,
Wigman,
why not?
with the good offensive line, man, I think he's the truth. I went back and we were doing a deep dive on the Texas A&M offensive skill positions. I went back and watched a little of that game against Miami, and I mean, blitz pickups were atrocious for Texas A&M. Connor Wigman just standing in there, firing some throws. I'm a believer in Connor Wigman. So
0 sacks in that game, by the way.
yeah,
0 sacks.
But when I was looking up the PFF,
One season,
like 27 pressures, like 8 quarterback hits. Like this dude was under duress all game, and he was just stepping up, delivering really nice footballs. I'm telling you, if Mike Elko and Adam Cushion, I think on the offensive line gets that group ready. I mean, I am such a believer in Connor Wigman and what he can do in 2024.
Yeah, and the bowl game too. Like, but I think it's also important, like for these wide receivers that potentially go, like Ashton Bethel Roman or Terry Bussey, whatever it is, or speedster, 5'8". Shoot, I'm forgetting. Whatever. There's another receiver committed.
Oh yeah, he
A&M.
was committed to them. Campbell,
Ernest.
Ernest Campbell.
Ernest Campbell. Yeah.
Yeah,
good
So
pull.
Yeah,
great pull, Jason. By the way, come on. I'm the A&M guy here, and you're just pulling names left and right. That's crazy. But definitely, like Marcel Reed, I thought was really good in the Oklahoma State game. So like, I think this A&M class, I think it was really impressive for what they did, like having to go through that coaching change and absolute exodus in the transfer portal. Oh no, it's over, right? And you have Texas and Oklahoma moving into the SEC, which is a huge recruiting pressure for A&M, right? When Texas is up and you're down, like it is tough to climb out of that ditch, right? Because those recruiting battles that you need to win, that Houston area that you recruit so well, all of a sudden, like it's over, right? So that insane response by Mike Elko, insane response. So I think this class, it might not end up in the top 15. It may not, but like I think it's insanely impressive for what was going on this offseason.
agreed.
So any other teams that are making moves?
I'd like to throw in Auburn real quick.
Yes.
We talked about them just a little bit this year, or in this video here. What they did, I thought, especially offensively, we saw the woes that they had, and a guy like Hugh Freeze, you don't expect that from. But if you look at the talent in that room, their O-line transfers didn't quite hit like they wanted to. we all know the quarterback Peyton Thorne there is not quite the guy that they thought they were getting, or maybe is exactly who they thought they were getting, and that's kind of who they had to play. But Cam Coleman, obviously the headliner, we talked about him a little bit earlier. He's a freak, 6'3", and from the state of Alabama, huge recruiting win. Once committed to A&M down there in College Station. But yeah, massive in-state win there. Perry Thompson, another wide receiver, right? Another in-state wide receiver from Foley, Alabama, right where Julio Jones was from as well. And then obviously on the trenches, which we talked about, kind of a common theme of this video, Amaris Williams, Jamonte Waller, and some other guys. I really like it. Not to mention Walker White, right? A top 50 quarterback or top 50 player at the quarterback position is also not a bad cherry on top for this class.
Huge echo with that. I think Auburn did a phenomenal job, and I maybe left a little bit to be desired in the transfer portal, but I think Hugh Freeze put a lot of emphasis on building that 2024 class, and obviously headlined by, and I'm happy you brought up the trenches, because I think all the credit goes to, all right, Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, phenomenal players, right? Cam Coleman's going to be special. I love what they did on the defensive line. You said Amaris Williams. This dude, in my mind, is a freak show. And I think he's going to be phenomenal for Auburn. You're talking about teams that I think are trending in the right direction, especially with all the, I guess, question marks you have around that Alabama program. Like, sign me up for the Auburn Tigers. And again, depending on the quarterback position in 2024, maybe some growing pains there. But we always say, like, Auburn and Hugh Freeze, they're building for 2025, 2026. Fire me up for the Auburn Tigers, because I think that's a program that's going in the right direction.
All right, last segment. We can make it a quick one. Chris found this graphic, actually, courtesy of 24/7 Sports, not affiliated. And
Yeah.
the interesting part about this, not affiliated. The interesting part about this graphic, though, that CD wanted to point out, though, is that I'm looking at a lot of G5 and FCS schools. I count 5 of them on this graphic, new 4-star prospects in this 2024 class. Jason, you were explaining a little bit on or before air here. Would you mind explaining to the viewers, maybe if that's common, like what's going on, like, or is this just like the parody in college football now? Like, well, what is that? Is this
I
crazy?
think it's a result of, like, there's so much talent across the country in the high school ranks. And so you're seeing guys, and I think I don't know enough about how, like, the NIL picture works. I don't think many people do, quite frankly, to, like, speak on that, but I do think there is parity is definitely growing, but I think it's more of a highlight on how much talent there is at the high school ranks. And there are guys who might fly under the radar during their junior year that really kind of break out into the scene their senior year. And by that time, a lot of big programs already have their classes kind of filled out. And so you have these really good players who get bumps in the rankings, still looking for a program to take them. And you're seeing teams like South Dakota State, like the Boise State Broncos, UNI, kind of swooping in and finding some of these guys that maybe went a little bit under the radar. Maybe they weren't fully developed as juniors. Maybe they played more. And one other comment I have on this, and I talk about this with my brother all the time, and I don't know if I'd say it's a flaw in some of these service recruiting rankings, but I think it might be, is they put a lot of stock in terms of track times, in terms of 7-on-7 camps. And I think a lot of these guys who might play 3 sports, and you're a state champ wrestler, and so you're not traveling down to the Under Armour All-American game where the 24/7 sports scouts have eyeballs on you. I think there are some guys that just kind of fall through the cracks, and I think you're kind of seeing that play out where there are some really good football players that just don't get the Power 5 attention that they might deserve till late on in the process, where these Power 5 teams already have their kind of classes figured out.
No, I love that. I think all that is absolutely true. To add another point on that as well, I've heard Andrew Ivins talk about it. Again, another 24/7's guy. So the whole reason that they do these rankings, I mean, obviously to make money, but other stuff, is they're built to echo the NFL draft, right? So you see, like, they have 32 5-stars for the first round, and obviously a bunch of other guys in that, in terms of, like, it's projecting your NFL future and when you'll be drafted and whatnot. So it's a lot of, like, you're seeing these NFL teams and players in the NFL from smaller schools, G5 and FCS, having more success. So GMs are looking at these guys and feeling safe and comfortable to take them earlier and earlier and earlier every single year. And so you got more guys from the FCS. You look at North Dakota State, you look at South Dakota State, guys that are having a ton of success early and also being drafted early. So I think it's giving, these recruiting ranking industries, a better confidence to be able to pull the trigger. Like, hey, if this guy's tape is really, really good. But like you mentioned, he couldn't make it down to Orlando or Tampa or wherever you're having these massive camps and 7-on-7 tournaments. But we love it. We love that he's a three-sport guy. He checks all the boxes, but he's in the middle of North Dakota, or he's in, he's from Boise, Idaho, like Gatlin Bear and things like that. Like they're feeling confident more and more and more. And also you have access to this information, film, you've got track times, stats, all this other good stuff that's available because of the blessing that technology is, in some regards, I guess. But yeah, I think all that remains true. And it's awesome to see. And I think it gives, schools like Western Michigan and you see Eastern Carolina and Northern Iowa, it gives them, their 5 seconds of fame. Like, hey, they found a guy early in the process. They got him signed on board and they said committed to him. And now they're being rewarded. And obviously, other schools will see that. And like, not only is it good for these coaches, but these programs and everything like that. And it's also nice for your fans to be like, hey, we're excited about this. Sam Thomas, don't know anything about him, to be honest, but he's an O lineman going to UNI. And like, those guys can be really excited for him. So I think it's awesome all around for college football.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I want to ask you this, and Jason, you'll probably be able to touch on this as well, but you always explain to me, Chris, for as a school like Minnesota, even though it's a big school, but it's tough to recruit at Minnesota, like how early it is to recruit these players early. Like I just pulled up a random one, right? I just pulled up Yannick Smith. He was committed in July to East Carolina. They offered him in May. They put in their work. They got him on campus, and then they get him to commit then and there. Like how important is that to these smaller schools to get on the guys early?
It's massive. I mean, as a Minnesota fan, and I wouldn't even say we're smaller, but in terms of the Big Ten landscape, we are on the lower side. If Michigan comes knocking, or if in-state Ohio State comes knocking, like we're not going to have too much of a chance to fight up against these guys. But so it's massive, and Minnesota is taking advantage of a new recent rule change to have official visits being able to be taken in the summer, right? Not only is the weather way better in Minneapolis in the summer, but also you get guys on campus and committed and shut down the recruitment and stop taking phone calls and all this good stuff. And so, yes, they don't quite blow up like they maybe would have in their senior season. So yeah, it's massive. And obviously that's, if you are in that situation as a program, right, you understand that and you have to be able to take advantage of that.
You agree with everything he says, Jason?
100%. I think when you're a smaller school, you got to do stuff a little bit of a different way, and I think partially that is like Christopher said, like identifying the guys that you want in your class and getting on them early, doing your work on them, getting them on campus, and I think that's probably huge for a lot of those programs, and especially to get them locked up, committed. And obviously, the word commitment, it doesn't really mean necessarily much until you sign on the dotted line, but getting them in your class while these other programs are building their classes, I think is massive. So I think that's how you have to do it when you're a smaller school. You see programs do a really good job of that. I think Minnesota probably comes to mind, where it's not necessarily the flashiest class according to 24/7 Sports, although I think you guys got a guy in Corey Perch, who I think's a dude. You see them kind of get their class, get their guys, if you will, and lock them in. And I think that's how you have to do it when you're maybe a school that is, I don't know, swinging a smaller stick on the recruiting trail than some of the opponents that you have to play in the fall.
Awesome. That's all we have time for today. We've already kept Jason longer than he was probably hoping we were going to keep him. So thank you to Jason and Rock Boys Football. Make sure you guys go in that description. Check him out, man. Like he's posting videos every single day. If something happens, you can expect a video like literally in 35 minutes. And that's why his channel has grown, because he's on top of that. He is on top of that. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. Your knowledge is grander than ours, so we appreciate this insight that you have and this perspective that you have. I mean, how'd you like it? I mean, back to
Awesome,
Zoom,
man. I a huge fan of what you guys do, and this is I could talk recruiting for hours. I appreciate you guys having me on. I had a blast. Anytime you guys want to talk some recruiting, anytime you guys want to talk some football, I'm 100% down. I appreciate you guys having the boys on, and hopefully we can run this back together sometime soon.
Yeah, I mean, we enjoyed rocking with the boys. CD, you want to take us out here?
Yeah, thank you so much to you, Jason, and your brother. We appreciate you guys. We look up to you guys. Your channel's awesome. Like Matthew said, their link is in the description. Check them out. They're fantastic. If you weren't convinced in this hour how much he knows and what they have there, that's on you, I guess. But yeah, like Matthew said, like our video, subscribe if you're new, comment what you want to see, And yeah, we'll be busy in the off season, so we can't wait. Hope you guys stick around for us.
And we will see you guys in the next one.